Hey everybody, Mr. Childers here, and welcome to Introduction to Ethics. This is module 0.2. We're going to talk a little bit about the connection between ethics and the sense of meaning in our life. And I want to open up with a story, a true story from, oh my goodness, this is like 20 years ago. About 20 years ago, I was riding a train, taking an Amtrak train down from pretty near the southern tip of Illinois back up to my home closer to Chicago, Illinois. And Illinois is a long state, so that's a nice long train ride. And it was a night ride, and there were very few other people on the train, but there was this one lady on the train a few seats away from me, and she was dressed very professionally. And throughout the whole train ride, she's working with a stack of papers. All right. She's got papers spread out all over her on the table in front of her, and she's working with the papers, and she's looks like she's organizing and filing the papers. She spends the whole train ride, and this is, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, maybe even 6 hours on the train. And at the end of when the train stops, when the train arrives, she's got all these piles of papers in front of her that she's been working with the whole time. And now this is before, I mean, it's not before the existence of cell phones, but nobody had smartphones at this time. You know, she's not taking pictures of the paper. She's doing some sort of what appears to be important to her anyway, paperwork with these papers. And at the end of the ride, she grabs up all the different stacks of papers. She stacks them all together real neatly. And as she's walking off the train, she drops them in the garbage. And, you know, my jaw drops to the floor, and I'm thinking, what in the heck did I just see? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Because what she had done, for whatever reason, sure, unless she was a psychopath, surely there's a story behind the scenes that I just don't know. But from the outside looking in, what she has done is she has just taken the several hours of work that she was doing, and she's made the whole experience meaningless. And we don't like for our experiences to be meaningless. We may be willing to waste our own time, but we don't like for our time to be wasted by others, and we don't like for our experience of life to be meaningless. What you're about to see here, this is the ruins of the ancient Greek city of Corinth, a very important ancient Greek city-state. And if you've studied any Greek mythology, or if you've taken classical studies with me, you know that in the storytelling mind of the Greeks, they have woven history and legend together to where it's very difficult to separate the two. And the Greeks tell a story of the first king of Corinth, and he was a fellow by the name of Sisyphus. And through a convoluted series of events that we don't need to get into for our purposes today, Sisyphus managed to do the impossible, and that is to cheat death, to escape from the underworld, and to grasp immortality for himself, though he was but a man. And the gods didn't take kindly to this, so they punished Sisyphus. Some of you will know this already. Sisyphus' punishment is to spend eternity pushing this heavy boulder up a hill. And as soon as he gets it right to the crest, to the top of the hill, what's going to happen? The boulder's going to roll all the way back down, and he'll have to start again from the beginning, over and over and over again for all eternity, with no hope of ever being relieved. As far as punishments go, as far as ancient Greek punishments, or even the hell that many people believe in today, it's relatively painless punishment, and yet it's a truly awful punishment. Why? Because Sisyphus' entire existence, his eternal existence, his very being, is now devoted to something that is utterly without meaning. We like for our existence, we like for our life to be meaningful. So I want you to think about a question with me. In class, we'll discuss this, since I'm making it all by making this video all by myself. We'll just ask you to think about it in your minds, because you can't answer me back, because that's not how videos work. But what is a meaningful life? Take a minute. Think, what does that mean to you? What does a meaningful life look like to you? In some ways, everybody's answer is going to be unique. Everybody's answer will be different, but there'll probably be some things that everybody holds in common. I can't imagine any sane person saying the most meaningful life for me would be to fail at everything I try, to be resented by everyone I love, to hurt emotionally, physically as much as possible, and to have my death be stupid and embarrassing. I never heard anyone say that that's a meaningful life for them. What is a meaningful life for you? Well, it just so happened I was very recently, this video is being made in August of 2023. So just this past summer, as I was preparing to teach this course for the first time, I happened to be watching this roundtable discussion on YouTube. It was a small group of folks. There were some psychologists, a philosopher, a theologian, and an artist, and they were sitting around reflecting on the nature of meaning. And one of the participants was this fellow, Robert Barron, and I just happened to catch his definition of meaning, which kind of came off the cuff in the conversation. He said, to live a meaningful life is to be in a purposive relationship to value. To live a meaningful life is to be in a purposive relationship to value. There are things, whether they be physical things, whether they be experiences, whether they be abstract concepts, there are things that we value. And our life, if you like his definition, our life is meaningful to the degree that we are relating to those things that we value in an intentional way, that we live our lives on purpose, connected to the things we value. We value things for three reasons, and there's going to be an embarrassing typo on this slide coming up, I believe. We value things for three reasons. We value some things because they are good, and we call those moral values. We value some things because they are true. We call those epistemic values. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that studies the nature of knowledge. Epistemos is one of the Greek words for knowledge. So we value things because they're good, we value things because they're true, and we value things because they are beautiful. And those are, I meant to fix this before I started recording, so now I've made a moron out of myself, but we value things because they are beautiful, and those are not moral, but aesthetic values. Good, things that are good, those are moral values. Things that are true, epistemic values. Things that are beautiful, aesthetic values, not moral, as I've accidentally doubled up on. And when I heard that, when I heard Robert Barron say that to live a meaningful life is to live in a purposive relationship with value, I did some more digging, and it just so happened that, like, the day before I did my digging, he had written a blog post where he was talking about his experience in this roundtable conversation, and he went on to say more about living in a purposive relationship to value. So this is still Robert Barron. He says, certain values, epistemic, moral, aesthetic, the true, the good, the beautiful, certain values appear in the world, and they draw us out of ourselves, calling us to honor them and to integrate them into our lives. So mathematical and philosophical truths beguile the mind and set it on a journey of discovery. Moral truths, on display in the saints and heroes of the tradition, stir the will into imitative action. We want to be like our heroes. We want to be like the people who show the good in their lives, the people who show moral value in their lives. And artistic beauty stops us in our tracks and compels us to wonder, and in turn to create. To order one's life in such a way that one consistently seeks such values is to have a properly meaningful life. Now, these three kinds of values that Barron mentions, the good, the true, the beautiful, moral values, epistemic values, aesthetic values, those three characteristics are not chosen arbitrarily. There's a long-running tradition in Western philosophy from the classical era, especially through the Middle Ages, and then continuing to live on in those philosophers more influenced by the medieval scholastics, to speak of something called the transcendental properties of being. We use the word being here. We're doing a little metaphysics here. It'll be ethics all semester. We're doing a little metaphysics here. When we speak of being, we're not speaking of individual beings. I'm a being, this being that is my shirt, this being that is the pencil, this being that is the Julius Caesar. Isn't it funny? I'm so funny. The Julius Caesar pencil holder. We're using being as in existence itself, the act of to be, the all, the everything, reality. And according to many philosophers in the Western tradition, there are 4 properties of being that apply to existence itself and that therefore apply to every being that exists, because an individual being that exists is a participation in the one act of existence. And though over the hundreds and even thousands of years this has been debated, there's been some difference in the way some philosophers number these properties. Generally, they are considered to be these 4. Goodness, truth, beauty, and unity. At the bottom, because we won't say much more about unity, existence is a single thing, and although the word thing here doesn't really apply, existence is a single act. Right? It's what everything that exists has in common is existence. So there are not 2 existences. There is one existence, one act of existence, and then the many are participations in that act of existence. What is existence like? Well, it is good, it is true, and it is beautiful, according to this philosophical tradition, which I'm suggesting as, at very least, a helpful model of reality. Goodness, truth, and beauty. This means that every being that exists, to the extent that it exists, is good, is true, and is beautiful. And to the extent that it is not good, not true, and not beautiful, well, then it does not exist. We often probably don't think about there being grades or stages of existence, that something can have more existence than something else. The fact is, that's the nature of being finite beings. Existence itself is often considered to be infinite, and yet all of the being itself is infinite, and yet all of the beings that participate in that are finite. Now, the properties of being are different than the properties of anything else that we're used to describing. So every being that we encounter, including ourselves, is a composite. Everything is made of parts. So this is my finger, there's my eye, my kidney's up in there somewhere. All of them are parts of me, and all of them are distinct from each other. So my finger is not my eye is not my kidney. I can't see with my kidney. I can't scratch my kidney with my eye. Everything we encounter is a composite being. It's made of parts, and those parts are not identical to each other. There is a real distinction between the parts. Because unity, oneness, is one of the transcendental properties of being. When it comes to being itself or existence itself, those properties, goodness, truth, and beauty, are not like the distinct parts of my body, but they are actually all the same reality, just considered from a different perspective. There's a popular Chinese proverb you may have heard about the old blind man and the elephant. And so the four blind men encounter an elephant and they're trying to describe it to each other. So the fellow that is holding on to the elephant's trunk says, well, an elephant is like a giant snake. And the fellow that's holding on to the elephant's leg says, oh, an elephant is like a tree trunk. And the fellow that's there by the elephant's butt just thinks, well, no, elephant is like turds or whatever. Each of them are correct, but each of them are limited in that they can they only have access to their own perspective. And so we need as many perspectives as possible to get a full accounting of what the elephant is. With the nature of being itself and the transcendental properties of being, that something is good, that it is true, that it is beautiful, that those seem like separate things is a feature not of existence itself, but it's a feature of the limitations of our own perspective. When in reality, goodness, truth, being, and unity, according to this philosophical perspective, are all the same thing. And they are identical with being. They become distinct based on the perspective from which we, finite creatures, look at existence itself, a potentially infinite reality. Does it seem odd that, I mean, goodness, truth, and beauty, they seem like different things. Does it seem odd that things that seem like different things could be in reality the same? Well, consider these three circles: small, medium, and large. If I were to cut out an equal length slice from the circumference of each of these three circles, you would see that the slice from the small circle would be far more sharply curved. And the slice from the medium circle would be less sharply curved. And from the larger circle, even less sharply curved. So what happens is the larger the circle gets, the more the slice taken from the circumference begins to approximate a straight line, from which it follows that an infinite circle is a straight line. So you have two geometric shapes that, from the limited perspective, the finite perspective of day-to-day life, could not be more different. The circle and the straight line, nobody confuses those two things on our level of reality. The ultimate level of reality, they are one and the same thing. So it is, according to this philosophical perspective, so it is with goodness, truth, and beauty. And though we can't fully grasp that at the level of our day-to-day experience, I do think we get glimpses of that. Let's take a look at a few of these glimpses. So here you have a man contemplating a beautiful sunset. And surely beauty is the property of being that most applies to this picture. But you know, in the right mood, in the right moment, you catch something beautiful. It might also, in a sense that is not physical and yet somehow is no less true, it may seem like there is something true about this image also. You have someone who dedicates her life to caring for elderly patients. This is a truly good thing. What you're seeing here is a picture of goodness. In fact, on the literal level, on the level of day-to-day experience, I have done this job in the past. You know, minute to minute, this is a job that is filled with a lot of sensory ugliness. The sights, the sounds, the smells one encounters in this job. I've changed the diapers of 85-year-old men. The sights, the smells, the sounds that one encounters in this job are quite ugly. And yet, when we think about someone devoting their life, doing the good thing of devoting their life to caring for the elderly, we can't help, I think, we can't help but find something beautiful about that too. A little glimpse, perhaps, into the fact that goodness and beauty are actually the same thing. The Taj Mahal, one of the masterpieces of human architecture, one of the most beautiful buildings ever built. Now, if I were to tear down the Taj Mahal and replace it with a Dollar General, this would be a crime against beauty, yes. But doesn't it also somehow feel, let's say I buy the property, let's say it's mine. And so while we can't put our finger on any particular moral precept I'd be violating, nevertheless, the crime against beauty also seems to be a crime against goodness. It also seems just wrong. This is Auschwitz, the Nazi concentration camp, a place that saw the near total absence of good, which is also the near total absence of beauty. And the motto on the gate is a lie: through work, freedom. The absence of goodness, the absence of beauty is also the absence of truth. Back to what Robert Barron said. Notice here, he says that these values, epistemic, moral, and aesthetic, the true, the good, and the beautiful, they appear in the world and they draw us out of ourselves, calling us to honor them and integrate them into our lives. There's something about these values. We'll focus for the rest of the semester on moral values because this is an ethics course, but the same is true for epistemic values and for aesthetic values, the things that we value because they are good, because they are true, because they are beautiful. They call to us to integrate them into our own lives. And this is an empowering sentiment, which puts us in the position of, at least in part, being our own creators, like this statue that is carving itself out of rock. What are the raw materials out of which we somehow counterintuitively are able to build ourselves as we become self-creators? What are the raw materials? Well, they are values. The things we value because they're good, things we value because they're true, the things we value because they are beautiful. We tend to think, when it comes to the kind of slippery notion of the self, I tend to think of the self as, okay, so you've got my skin and my hair, all right? And that can be I'm not trying to draw attention to my pale freckled skin and my orange monkey fur, but my skin and my hair sort of serves as the boundary to myself. It's the border wall, all right? And everything on the inside of that wall of skin and hair is me, and everything on the outside of the wall is not me. But that's a very oversimplified way of looking at things, because the boundaries to the self are far more porous, far more fluid than just the boundaries of the biological system of cells that I normally call me. There are all sorts of realities that aren't contained beneath my skin that are nevertheless part of me. They may not be physical parts of me, but I don't think they are any less literally true parts of me. My family. I wouldn't be me without my family. My family is a part of me. And that doesn't stop being true, even though many of the people I love are not with us anymore, and many of the others I don't see often. Nevertheless, they remain a part of me. My friends and all the experiences I had with my friends, especially when I was younger, are part of me. I am not me without them, despite the fact that now I don't live close to very many of them and don't see many of them very often. My education, not just the book learning, but the experience that I had being educated how I did, being educated where I did. I'm not me without that. My students. I'm not me without my students. And this is true despite the fact that I'm still a pretty new teacher. I'm starting my 6th year of teaching. right now, which means by far for most of my life, I did not have any students, and yet somehow without them, I am not me. And then the stories that I love. If you've had my humanities class, we talk about how the human person is the storytelling animal. And I have a very high view of the value of the fictional stories and the relationships we build with fictional characters. And so the stories I grew up with, the Incredible Hulk, Star Wars, other stories, are as much a part of me than any chunk of tissue beneath my skin, more so than most of it. I hope never to lose any toes, but I could do without my toes a lot more easily than I could do without my family or without my students or without the Hulk. The final thing to think about, some final words for us today, and then we will conclude this lesson. We're hearing from the late W. Norris Clarke from his book, Person and Being. Norris Clarke is one of my favorite near contemporary philosophers. He passed away, it's been more than 10 years ago now, but still he lived at the same time as me. So he's near contemporary. What he's talking about here is how impossible it is for the self to be the self in isolation. He says our intellectual consciousness starts off not yet in act, but in potential, in the dark, so to speak. It must be activated from without. First by a movement outward toward the material world, and then actuated by the stimulus of incoming sense knowledge and intellectual response to it. It returns back to its source within and lights up in a conscious self-presence. So in the process of forming into ourselves, we must reach out unknowingly to the world of real beings around us. We experience the world of real beings through our senses, and then we start to think about, to reflect on the sense experience, and this is how we start to form as a me, as an I, as a self. Like Sleeping Beauty, we must first be touched by another before we can wake up to ourselves. This process of awakening from latent, meaning potential, sleeping almost, to explicit self-consciousness is one that unfolds slowly, spread out over several years of time. And it seems that the explicit awakening to self-awareness as an I, as a self, can only be done by another human person reaching out to us with love and treating us as a person, calling us into a you, me relation. So we must first go out to the external world, in particular to other people, to other persons, and then return to our center, newly awakened, to recognize ourselves explicitly as persons. The relation to others comes first, then the awakening to ourselves as persons. And what we do when we pursue the study of ethics is we look at how ought we to conduct our relations to other people and to the world around us. And at least in the model that Norris Clarke just built for us, that's the same process by which we form ourselves. And when we do that formation of ourselves intentionally, purposefully in relation to values, moral values, that which is good, aesthetic values, that which is beautiful, epistemic values, that which is true, then we live meaningful lives. That's all for today. Next time, we will talk about the relationship between ethics and religion. Oh, I haven't hit the stop button yet. Sorry.